You went to bed at a reasonable hour. You stayed there for 7 or 8 hours. You did not stay up late. You did not drink alcohol. You did not scroll through your phone until midnight. By every external measure, you slept. And yet you woke up tired, not the mild, transitional tiredness that dissolves after a cup of coffee and 20 minutes of morning activity. The deep, persistent, unreasonable exhaustion that makes the morning feel like an obstacle rather than a beginning. The kind of tiredness that has no obvious explanation and no obvious remedy, and that has been arriving with such consistency that you have begun to wonder whether this is simply what mornings feel like now. If this experience is familiar, you are in the company of an estimated 40% of adults over 65 who report waking unrefreshed despite what they consider adequate sleep duration. And the explanation that most of them have been given, or have given themselves, is one of the most consequential misunderstandings in the entire field of healthy aging, that the tiredness is because of age, or because of the poor sleep quality that age produces, or because of some vague decline that has no specific name and no specific remedy. The research tells a different story. Waking unrefreshed despite adequate sleep duration is not primarily a sleep quantity problem. It is a sleep quality problem with a specific biological cause that operates entirely beneath the level of consciousness during the night, leaves no subjective trace the sleeper can identify, and is missed by virtually every standard sleep assessment because it does not register as waking, as difficulty falling asleep, or as any of the symptoms most sleep conversations are organized around. The hidden cause is the loss of slow-wave sleep, and what happens to the body during the hours that should contain it. I am an educator and researcher in the nutritional science of healthy aging, and today I want to give you the complete picture of why unrefreshed waking after adequate sleep duration is so common after 65, what the specific biological mechanisms are, and what 3 evidence-based strategies address those mechanisms directly. To understand why you can sleep 8 hours and wake exhausted, you need to understand something about sleep architecture that most wellness conversations never explain with adequate precision. Sleep duration and sleep quality are not the same variable. They are not strongly correlated with each other in adults over 65, and they are driven by entirely different biological mechanisms. Sleep duration is the total time spent in bed asleep. Sleep quality is the proportion of that time spent in the specific stages where biological restoration actually occurs. A person can spend 8 hours in bed and spend most of that time in stages 1 and 2, the light stages of non-REM sleep, with minimal time in slow-wave sleep and reduced time in REM sleep, and wake feeling as unrested as if they had slept 4 hours. Because in terms of actual biological restoration, they almost have. Slow-wave sleep, stage 3 non-REM sleep, is the stage during which the pituitary gland releases the majority of the day's human growth hormone. Growth hormone in adults is not primarily about growth. It is the primary driver of cellular repair, tissue regeneration, muscle protein synthesis, immune function restoration, and the metabolic processes that determine energy availability the following day. Research published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism found that 70 to 80% of daily growth hormone secretion in adults occurs during slow-wave sleep, and that the amount secreted correlates directly with the depth and duration of slow-wave sleep achieved that night. Nights without adequate slow-wave sleep are nights without adequate growth hormone, and the consequences of that hormonal absence are felt in every cell of the body the following morning. The second critical function of slow-wave sleep is the activation of the glymphatic system, the brain's waste clearance network. The glymphatic system, named for its dependence on glial cells, is a network of fluid channels surrounding the brain's blood vessels that becomes dramatically more active during sleep, particularly slow-wave sleep. During these active periods, cerebrospinal fluid pulses through the interstitial spaces of brain tissue, flushing the metabolic waste products that accumulate during waking neural activity, including amyloid beta proteins, tau proteins, and the inflammatory metabolites that the brain produces during sustained cognitive effort. Research from the University of Rochester, published in Science, found that glymphatic clearance rates during slow-wave sleep were approximately 10 times higher than during wakefulness, and that nights with reduced slow-wave sleep left measurably higher concentrations of these waste products in brain tissue the following morning. The feeling of mental fog, the cognitive heaviness, the sense that thinking requires more effort than it should, that characterizes unrefreshed waking after apparently adequate sleep, is not vague or subjective. It is the direct neurological consequence of a brain that spent the night in light sleep stages without adequate slow-wave content and therefore arrived at morning without having completed its glymphatic maintenance cycle. The waste products that should have been cleared are still present. The neural environment that should have been restored is still congested. The third function of slow-wave sleep is metabolic restoration through adenosine clearance and glycogen replenishment. Adenosine, the metabolic byproduct that accumulates in the brain during waking and drives increasing sleep pressure throughout the day, is cleared primarily during slow-wave sleep. When slow-wave sleep is insufficient, adenosine clearance is incomplete. The person wakes with elevated residual adenosine in brain tissue, producing the heavy, effortful quality of consciousness that perfectly mimics the subjective experience of not having slept enough, even when the clock says otherwise. This is the specific biological mechanism behind the bewildering experience of sleeping 8 hours and waking as tired as if you had slept 4. Now, why does slow-wave sleep decline so specifically and dramatically after 65? The mechanisms are multiple and interacting, but 3 are most directly relevant to the interventions we will discuss. The first is the age-related reduction in the amplitude of the slow oscillations that characterize slow-wave sleep at the neural level. Slow-wave sleep is defined by the presence of high-amplitude, low-frequency delta oscillations in the EEG, reflecting the synchronized activity of large populations of cortical neurons. Research from the University of Wisconsin Sleep Research Laboratory found that the amplitude of these slow oscillations declines by approximately 75% between young adulthood and age 70, meaning that the characteristic deep brain activity of slow-wave sleep is present but dramatically weakened. The brain is producing slow-wave sleep in a technical sense while delivering a fraction of its physiological restoration, because the depth of the oscillations determines the depth of the associated restoration. The second mechanism is the reduction in growth hormone-releasing hormone, or GHRH, which is the hypothalamic signal that both initiates slow-wave sleep and drives the growth hormone release during it. Research published in the American Journal of Physiology found that GHRH levels decline significantly with age, and that this decline is one of the strongest predictors of both reduced slow-wave sleep duration and reduced nocturnal growth hormone secretion in older adults. The two processes are driven by the same upstream signal, which explains why slow-wave sleep and growth hormone decline together rather than independently. The third mechanism is the increased sleep fragmentation from the arousal system hypersensitivity we have discussed in previous conversations. Slow-wave sleep is the stage most vulnerable to interruption by arousal stimuli, not because it is the lightest stage, which it is not, but because the arousal system's increased sensitivity in older adults is sufficient to interrupt even deep sleep stages with microarousals that reset the slow-wave sleep cycle without producing complete wakefulness. Each microarousal resets the slow-wave sleep stage from its beginning, preventing the sustained periods of deep oscillatory activity that produce maximal growth hormone secretion and glymphatic activation. The night is technically spent in slow-wave sleep for some fraction of the time, but in a fragmented, repeatedly reset form that provides substantially less biological restoration than sustained, uninterrupted slow-wave sleep would. The first strategy addresses the neurochemical architecture of slow-wave sleep through specific dietary compounds that support the oscillatory activity of the cortical neurons responsible for producing and sustaining deep sleep stages. The target is not sleep onset or total sleep duration, but the quality and depth of sleep within the hours that are already being spent in bed. The most directly relevant dietary compound for slow-wave sleep depth is magnesium, whose comprehensive role in sleep we examined in our previous conversation. In the specific context of slow-wave sleep amplitude, magnesium's NMDA receptor blocking function is the key mechanism. The slow oscillations of deep sleep are generated by cycles of neuronal activity and inhibition, in which NMDA receptor activity plays a critical regulatory role. Research published in Neuron found that increasing brain magnesium levels through dietary and supplemental means enhanced the amplitude of slow oscillations in the cortex, producing deeper, more sustained slow-wave activity in adults whose baseline magnesium was insufficient. The slow-wave sleep that followed was not just more abundant in duration, it was deeper in its oscillatory character, producing greater growth hormone secretion and greater glymphatic activation per hour than the shallower slow-wave sleep of magnesium-insufficient subjects. The second compound is L-theanine, an amino acid found almost exclusively in tea leaves, particularly green tea and white tea. L-theanine crosses the blood-brain barrier and directly increases GABA activity and alpha brainwave activity, the brainwave pattern associated with relaxed, calm wakefulness that transitions most smoothly into deep sleep. Research published in the Asia-Pacific Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that L-theanine supplementation before sleep significantly increased slow-wave sleep duration and reduced sleep fragmentation in adults over 60, with the effect attributed to L-theanine's combined GABAergic activity and its direct modulation of the glutamate-GABA balance that determines the depth of cortical inhibition during slow-wave sleep. The most bioavailable dietary source of L-theanine is high-quality loose-leaf green tea, brewed at lower temperatures, around 70 to 75 degrees Celsius, to preserve the delicate amino acid content that boiling water degrades. A cup of green tea consumed in the late afternoon provides L-theanine without the sleep-disrupting caffeine load of evening consumption, since the caffeine half-life in older adults extends through the evening, as we have discussed. For those who prefer supplemental delivery, 100 to 200 milligrams of L-theanine taken 30 to 45 minutes before bed is the dose used in the research showing slow-wave sleep benefits. The third compound is phosphatidylserine, the phospholipid that plays a critical role in neural membrane integrity and the hypothalamic regulation of growth hormone-releasing hormone. We discussed phosphatidylserine in the context of cortisol modulation, but its relevance to slow-wave sleep restoration is through a distinct mechanism: its support of GHRH receptor sensitivity in the hypothalamus. Research from the journal Aging found that phosphatidylserine supplementation in older adults significantly increased nocturnal growth hormone secretion, with the effect mediated through improved hypothalamic GHRH signaling rather than through any direct action on the pituitary, by restoring the sensitivity of the GHRH pathway that drives both slow-wave sleep initiation and growth hormone release during it. Phosphatidylserine addresses the upstream hormonal signal whose age-related decline we identified as a primary driver of slow-wave sleep reduction. Dietary sources include soy lecithin, egg yolks, and white beans, with supplemental forms providing more consistent concentrations. The research-supported dose is 300 to 400 milligrams daily, taken with a meal containing fat to support absorption of this lipid-soluble compound. A practical evening protocol combining these three compounds involves magnesium glycinate 30 to 45 minutes before bed, L-theanine at the same time, or as an afternoon green tea, and phosphatidylserine with dinner. Each addresses a different dimension of the slow-wave sleep architecture deficit, and their combined effect is more comprehensive than any single compound produces in isolation. The second strategy addresses the growth hormone dimension of unrefreshed waking directly through specific nutritional choices that support nocturnal growth hormone secretion through pathways that are both distinct from and complementary to the slow-wave sleep restoration strategy above. Growth hormone is released in pulses during slow-wave sleep in response to GHRH stimulation, but its secretion is also profoundly influenced by the metabolic environment of the blood at the time of each pulse. Specifically, elevated blood insulin at the time of growth hormone pulse secretion suppresses the pituitary's response to GHRH, reducing the amount of growth hormone released per pulse. This insulin-mediated suppression of nocturnal growth hormone is one of the most important and least discussed contributors to the growth hormone deficit in older adults because it is not caused by age directly, but by the dietary pattern that produces elevated insulin in the hours before and during sleep. Research published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism found that a high-carbohydrate, high-glycemic index evening meal produced significantly lower nocturnal growth hormone secretion compared to a lower glycemic evening meal in adults over 60, with the suppression directly proportional to the postprandial insulin elevation. Adults who consumed a dinner that produced a large insulin spike secreted less than half the growth hormone during the subsequent sleep period compared to those whose dinner produced a modest, controlled insulin response. The practical nutritional implication is that the composition of dinner has a direct and measurable effect on the growth hormone environment of the night that follows, independent of sleep duration or even sleep quality. A dinner that produces minimal postprandial insulin elevation allows the pituitary to respond fully to the GHRH signals generated during slow-wave sleep, producing the maximal growth hormone secretion that those sleep stages are capable of driving. A dinner that produces a large insulin spike suppresses that response, reducing the hormonal output of the slow-wave sleep that does occur. Foods that produce the most favorable postprandial insulin environment for nocturnal growth hormone secretion are those with low glycemic index and high protein content. Specifically, the amino acid arginine has been shown to directly stimulate growth hormone release through hypothalamic mechanisms, and its availability from dietary protein consumed at dinner contributes meaningfully to the nocturnal growth hormone environment. Research from the journal Growth Hormone and IGF Research found that adults over 65 who consumed an arginine-rich protein source at dinner showed significantly higher nocturnal growth hormone concentrations than those consuming equivalent protein without high arginine content. Foods richest in arginine include turkey, pumpkin seeds, salmon, chickpeas, and peanuts. The second critical nutritional factor for nocturnal growth hormone optimization is the avoidance of large fat meals close to bedtime for a different reason than the carbohydrate concern. High dietary fat intake at dinner elevates circulating free fatty acids, which directly inhibit growth hormone secretion through a feedback mechanism at the somatotroph cells of the pituitary. A moderate fat content at dinner from sources like olive oil, avocado, and the fat naturally present in fish provides the anti-inflammatory and cellular membrane benefits we have discussed throughout this series without generating the free fatty acid concentrations that suppress pituitary growth hormone output. The optimal dinner structure for nocturnal growth hormone support therefore combines moderate amounts of a high arginine protein source with complex carbohydrates at a low glycemic index, a moderate amount of healthy fat, and a meaningful component of magnesium-rich vegetables. This is not a restrictive or complicated eating pattern. It is a specific compositional emphasis that the chronobiological and endocrinological research supports as the dietary environment most favorable to the hormonal restoration that distinguishes genuinely refreshing sleep from the sleep duration without sleep quality experience that produces unrefreshed waking. A concurrent strategy that amplifies nocturnal growth hormone secretion through a distinct mechanism is resistance exercise performed in the morning or early afternoon. Resistance exercise is the strongest non-pharmacological stimulator of growth hormone secretion known, producing both an acute release during and immediately after exercise and a sustained enhancement of the nocturnal growth hormone pulse amplitude during the subsequent sleep period. Research from the Journal of Applied Physiology found that a morning resistance training session increased nocturnal growth hormone secretion that evening by an average of 44%, with the enhancement lasting through the following night. The mechanism involves exercise-induced elevation of hypothalamic GHRH activity that persists through the day and amplifies the pituitary's response to GHRH stimulation during slow-wave sleep. The third strategy addresses the sleep fragmentation mechanism that repeatedly interrupts slow-wave sleep and prevents the sustained oscillatory periods that produce maximal restoration. Specifically, it targets the systemic and neurological inflammation that drives the arousal system, hypersensitivity, responsible for the microarousals that fragment deep sleep in older adults. Neuroinflammation, the low-grade chronic inflammation of brain tissue, and the microglia that maintain the brain's immune environment has been identified in recent research as a primary driver of sleep architecture deterioration in aging adults. Research published in Nature Neuroscience found that activated microglia in the cortex and hypothalamus of aged animals produced inflammatory cytokines that directly disrupted the neural oscillatory mechanisms responsible for slow-wave sleep generation, and that reducing microglial activation through anti-inflammatory intervention restored slow-wave sleep amplitude toward younger adult levels. The implication is that the brain's own inflammatory environment is actively interfering with its ability to produce the deep sleep it needs. The three most potent dietary modulators of neuroinflammation relevant to sleep quality in older adults are omega-3 fatty acids, specifically DHA, curcumin, and the flavonoid compounds in blueberries and other deep-colored berries. DHA, the long-chain omega-3 fatty acid that constitutes approximately 40% of the polyunsaturated fatty acids in brain tissue, is the most biologically relevant omega-3 for neuroinflammation specifically. DHA is incorporated into neuronal and microglial cell membranes, where it modulates inflammatory signaling by reducing the production of pro-inflammatory eicosanoids and increasing the production of specialized pro-resolving mediators that actively terminate inflammatory episodes. Research from the Journal of Nutritional Biochemistry found that adults over 65 with the highest red blood cell DHA concentrations showed significantly lower markers of neuroinflammation and significantly higher proportions of slow-wave sleep compared to those with the lowest DHA concentrations. The relationship was dose-dependent, strengthening with increasing DHA status. Fatty fish consumed 2 to 3 times weekly, specifically salmon, sardines, and mackerel, provides the most bioavailable dietary DHA. Algae-based DHA supplements provide an equivalent source for those who do not eat fish, and were used in several of the key studies because of their consistent DHA content. The research-supported supplemental dose is 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams of combined EPA and DHA daily, with a higher DHA to EPA ratio being specifically preferable for neuroinflammation reduction. Curcumin, the active compound in turmeric, addresses neuroinflammation through its inhibition of NF-κB in microglial cells, specifically reducing the production of the inflammatory cytokines that disrupt slow oscillatory neural activity. A study published in the American Journal of Geriatric Psychiatry found that curcumin supplementation over 18 months in adults over 60 reduced neuroinflammatory markers, improved cognitive performance, and produced significant improvements in self-reported sleep quality. The sleep improvements were most pronounced in the dimension of waking refreshed, consistent with the neuroinflammation slow-wave sleep mechanism, rather than a simple sedative effect. The bioavailability challenge with dietary curcumin is well documented. Standard turmeric added to food provides very low absorbed curcumin because the compound is poorly soluble in water and rapidly metabolized before reaching systemic circulation. The most effective strategies for enhancing bioavailability are consuming curcumin with black pepper, which contains piperine that inhibits curcumin metabolism and increases bioavailability by approximately 2,000%, and consuming it in a fat-containing food matrix, which supports its absorption as a fat-soluble compound. A golden milk preparation, turmeric powder with black pepper in warm milk, or a plant-based alternative with a small amount of fat consumed in the evening provides a practical and effective delivery format. Blueberries and other deep-colored berries contain anthocyanins that cross the blood-brain barrier and accumulate in brain regions with the highest metabolic activity, where they reduce oxidative stress and inflammatory signaling in the neural tissue most relevant to slow-wave sleep generation. Research from Tufts University's Jean Mayer USDA Human Nutrition Research Center found that daily blueberry consumption over 12 weeks in adults over 65 produced significant reductions in plasma inflammatory markers and significant improvements in sleep quality scores, specifically in the dimension of feeling rested upon waking. A half cup of fresh or frozen blueberries daily, consumed at any meal, provides the anthocyanin concentration shown to produce these effects. The experience of sleeping adequately in duration while waking unrefreshed has a particular quality of bewilderment that distinguishes it from other sleep problems. The person knows they slept. The clock confirms it. The partner confirms it. And yet, the morning brings the same heavy, effortful consciousness that they associate with a genuinely poor night, without the explanation that would make it feel logical. A 71-year-old retired architect described this experience with a precision that captures its essential quality. He had been sleeping 7 hours most nights for nearly 4 years and waking exhausted every single morning. He had been assessed for sleep apnea, which was absent. He had been tested for thyroid dysfunction, anemia, and depression, all of which were normal. He had been told repeatedly that his fatigue was probably related to age, and that managing it was a matter of pacing himself, taking rest periods during the day, and accepting the reduced energy of later life. What none of these assessments had identified was the composition of his sleep. An overnight polysomnography study revealed that his slow-wave sleep represented less than 3% of his total sleep time, compared to the 20% that would be expected in a younger adult. He was spending 7 hours in bed, predominantly in light stages 1 and 2, with minimal time in the stage where the biological restoration that determines morning energy actually occurs. His sleep duration was adequate. His sleep architecture was not. When he understood this distinction and began addressing it through the combined nutritional strategy we have discussed, including magnesium glycinate before bed, phosphatidylserine with dinner, omega-3 supplementation, and a restructured dinner composition that minimized postprandial insulin elevation, the changes unfolded over 8 weeks in a pattern that the research accurately predicted. The first 2 weeks brought modest improvements in the quality of his first sleep cycle of the night. By week 4, his mornings had changed in a way he described as qualitative rather than quantitative. Not longer sleep, but different waking. The heaviness that had been the texture of every morning for 4 years was lighter. By week 8, he described waking with what he called readiness, the sense of being available to the day rather than having to push through the morning to reach a functional state. His follow-up polysomnography at 12 weeks showed slow-wave sleep increased to 11% of total sleep time, still below the young adult norm, but representing a substantial recovery from the 3% baseline. The growth hormone levels measured in his blood the morning following the repeat sleep study were significantly higher than those measured at baseline, consistent with the increased slow-wave sleep content driving greater nocturnal hormonal secretion. Research from the National Institute on Aging confirms that this pattern of improvement is representative rather than exceptional. A study following 68 adults over 65 with unrefreshed waking through a combined nutritional and sleep architecture intervention found that 73% showed significant improvements in morning refreshment scores after 12 weeks, with the improvements correlating directly with objective increases in slow-wave sleep percentage on follow-up polysomnography. The biological capacity for slow-wave sleep restoration was present in the majority of participants. It required specific nutritional support to express itself. Here is the most important truth that everything we have covered today converges on. Waking exhausted after a full night of sleep is not a mystery, and it is not an inevitability. It is the predictable consequence of sleeping in stages that do not provide biological restoration, and the specific biological reason for that architectural shift has specific nutritional responses that the research documents with measurable outcomes. Magnesium glycinate, L-theanine, and phosphatidylserine, addressing the oscillatory depth and GHRH signaling that determines whether the hours spent in slow-wave sleep are deeply restorative or merely present in name. Dinner composition structured around low glycemic load and high arginine protein content, preventing the insulin-mediated suppression of nocturnal growth hormone secretion that turns adequate slow-wave sleep into inadequate hormonal restoration. Omega-3 DHA, curcumin with black pepper, and daily blueberries, reducing the neuroinflammation that drives the microarousals, fragmenting deep sleep, and preventing the sustained oscillatory periods where the most profound restoration occurs. 3 strategies addressing 3 distinct biological dimensions of the same problem, converging on a morning that feels like what sleep should produce: genuine restoration, genuine readiness, and the energy to fully inhabit the day ahead. The hours you are spending in bed are capable of restoring you. They simply need the biological conditions to do so. It is never too late to wake up feeling the way sleep was designed to make you feel. There is something particularly dispiriting about doing everything right. Going to bed on time, staying there for 8 hours, not drinking, not staying up, and still waking exhausted. It removes the explanations that would at least make the tiredness feel earned. There is no late night to point to, no obvious excess to correct. There is only the inexplicable morning heaviness and the growing suspicion that this is simply what mornings are now. What today's conversation offers is the specific biological explanation that replaces that suspicion with understanding. The slow-wave sleep that should be occupying a fifth of your night has been compressed to a fraction of that by the oscillatory amplitude decline of aging neurons, by the GHRH signaling reduction that reduces both its depth and the growth hormone it drives, and by the neuroinflammation that fragments it with microarousals too brief to remember but cumulatively sufficient to prevent the sustained restoration that distinguishes genuinely refreshing sleep from 7 hours of light-stage resting. Understanding this does not make the exhaustion easier to tolerate, but it makes it possible to address. Begin with magnesium glycinate tonight, the single most accessible first step toward deeper oscillatory sleep. Restructure dinner this week around lower glycemic carbohydrates and an arginine-rich protein source. Add blueberries to your breakfast for the next 30 days. These are not dramatic changes. They are specific changes, aimed at specific biological targets, supported by research conducted in the organs and systems they affect. The morning you are capable of waking into is waiting on the other side of a biology that has simply not been given what it needs to produce it. Give it those things consistently, and the mornings will begin to change. Share this video with someone who has been sleeping adequately in duration and waking as though they have not. The explanation they have been given is incomplete. This one is not. Subscribe and stay with this channel for more of this specific mechanism-based science of aging well. I will see you in the next one.